Headlights cut through the darkness as the sled came to a stop, a shadowy figure leaping toward the barely lit house. A seemingly hopeless child, sheltered by a brave dog, sat motionless inside, clutching an old doll. Richard pulled into the driveway, the engine of his patrol car rumbling to a stop. He glanced at the clock on the dashboard. 6:47 p.m. Another long shift done. He stepped out, the crisp evening air brushing against his uniform, and trudged toward the small house where a faint light glowed from the living room window. Inside, he knew Lily would be waiting, his 4-year-old daughter, his quiet shadow. "Lily, I'm home," he called, kicking off his boots by the door. No answer. He wasn't surprised. She hadn't spoken a word in over a year, not since Anna's car accident. Richard still saw it in his mind, the twisted metal, the rain-soaked road, his wife gone in an instant while picking Lily up from daycare. Now it was just the two of them, trapped in a silence that felt heavier every day. He found her in the corner of the living room, curled up on the floor with Anna's old ragdoll clutched to her chest. Her dark hair fell over her face, hiding those sad, hollow eyes. "Hey, sweetheart," he said softly, kneeling beside her. "Did you eat the sandwich I left?" She didn't look up, just hugged the doll tighter. Richard sighed, running a hand through his hair. He wasn't cut out for this. Being a single dad trying to reach a kid who'd locked herself away. The days blurred into a routine. He'd wake up, make breakfast, usually cereal since it was all Lily would touch, then head out for patrol. 12-hour shifts kept him busy, chasing speeders or breaking up bar fights in their sleepy little town. When he got home, it was the same. Lily in her corner, him fumbling through dinner, the house echoing with everything they didn't say. He tried talking to her, telling her stories about Anna, but it was like shouting into a void. She'd just stare, her small face a mirror of grief he couldn't fix. One afternoon, things shifted. Richard was walking back from the station with Brave, his team's German shepherd, when he heard jeering voices. Down the street, a group of kids circled Lily, their taunts sharp and cruel. "What's wrong, weirdo? Too dumb to talk," one of them sneered, tossing a pebble that bounced off her shoulder. Lily stood frozen, clutching the doll, her eyes fixed on the ground. "Hey!" Richard shouted, quickening his pace, but before he could reach her, Brave bolted forward. The old dog's growl rumbled low as he planted himself between Lily and the kids, baring his teeth just enough to send them scattering. "Scram! Now!" Richard said, and they ran off, leaving Lily trembling in the dust. Brave nudged her hand with his nose, but she didn't move. Richard crouched beside her. "You okay, kiddo?" She nodded faintly, her gaze flickering to Brave. The dog sat there, ears perked, his graying muzzle catching the sunlight. Brave was nearing retirement, too old for the force, too loyal to be left behind. No one had claimed him yet. An idea sparked in Richard's mind. What if we take him home, huh? He's a good boy. Maybe he'd like to stay with us. That night, Brave padded into the house, his claws clicking on the hard wood. Richard set up a blanket in the corner, watching as Lily lingered by the couch. She didn't approach, didn't say a word, just studied the dog from afar. Brave tilted his head, then flopped down with a huff, his dark eyes meeting hers. For the first time in months, Richard noticed something. A flicker in Lily's expression. A crack in the emptiness. It wasn't much, but it was enough. Brave's heavy paws thudded against the floor as he explored the house, his black coat gleaming under the kitchen light. Richard watched him sniff around, tail wagging lazily, those sharp yet gentle eyes taking in every corner. "All right, big guy, this is home now," Richard said, tossing a chewed-up tennis ball from his patrol bag onto the rug. Brave perked up, trotting over to inspect it, but Lily stayed put, perched on the edge of the couch like a statue. "See, he's friendly," Richard said, glancing at her. "You can pet him if you want, just go slow." He demonstrated, running his hand along Brave's back, the dog leaning into the touch with a contented grunt. Lily's fingers twitched, but she didn't budge, her gaze locked on Brave like she was sizing him up. Richard didn't push. He'd learned by now that forcing her only built higher walls. The next few days settled into a quiet rhythm. Brave took to sprawling out by the fireplace, his snores filling the room while Richard cooked dinner, usually spaghetti, the one thing he couldn't mess up. Lily hovered nearby, not joining them at the table but watching from her spot by the window. Then, one morning, Brave did something new. He grabbed that tennis ball in his jaws, lumbered over to Lily, and dropped it at her feet with a soft thud. He sat back, ears cocked, waiting. Richard held his breath, peering over the rim of his coffee mug. Lily stared at the ball, then at Brave, her face unreadable. After a long pause, she nudged it with her toe, barely an inch. Brave pounced, tail wagging like he'd won a prize, and brought it right back. "Looks like he's got a new playmate," Richard chuckled, but inside, his chest tightened with something like hope. That evening, while he was washing dishes, he caught a flash of movement outside. Through the window, he saw Lily in the backyard, the ball in her hand. She tossed it, tentative, clumsy, and Brave bounded after it, kicking up dirt. She didn't smile, not yet, but her shoulders weren't so hunched, her eyes not so dull. Richard turned off the faucet and just stood there, watching, a grin tugging at his lips. Then came the storm. It rolled in late one night, thunder rattling the windows, lightning slashing the sky. Richard woke to the sound of it, pulling on a shirt as he stumbled into the hall. "Lily?" he called, voice rough with sleep. He found her in the living room, curled into a ball by the couch, hands clamped over her ears. Rain pounded the roof, and a crack of thunder made her flinch hard. Before Richard could reach her, Brave was there. The dog eased himself down beside her, pressing his warm bulk against her side. He rested his head on her lap, steady and calm, like he'd done this 1,000 times. Richard froze in the doorway, heart pounding. Lily's trembling slowed, her breaths evening out. Then, in a voice so soft he almost missed it, she whispered, "You're brave, so I want to be brave too." Her small hand settled on the dog's head, fingers curling into his fur. Richard's throat closed up, tears stinging his eyes. He leaned against the frame, wiping his face with his sleeve. The sound of her voice, her first words in a year, echoing in his skull. By the end of the week, things felt different. Lily started trailing Brave around the house, her steps light and cautious. She'd giggle, tiny, fleeting sounds, when he'd flop over for a belly rub. Richard caught himself smiling more, the weight on his shoulders lifting just a little. The house wasn't whole, not yet, but it was starting to feel like a home again. The sun hung low over the horizon, painting the town in shades of gold as Richard flipped burgers on the grill. The backyard smelled of charcoal and summer grass, a rare evening off from patrol. Lily darted around with Brave, her laughter, a sound still so new it caught Richard off guard, ringing out as she waved a stick for the dog to chase. Brave lumbered after it, his tongue lolling, his limp from years of service barely noticeable in the excitement. "Careful, you two," Richard called, flipping a patty with a grin. "Dinner's almost ready." Inside, the kitchen table was set for 3, 2 plates and a bowl of kibble for Brave. Lily had insisted he eat with them, dragging his mat to the corner of the room. Over dinner, she chattered to Brave about a story she'd made up, and then Mummy turned into a star and she twinkled at us from the sky. Her voice was small but steady, each word a victory. Richard listened, chewing slowly, his heart swelling with a mix of pride and ache. Brave tilted his head, ears twitching like he understood every bit. Life had found a gentle groove. Mornings started with Lily tugging Brave's leash for a walk around the block, her chatter filling the quiet streets. Afternoons, she'd sprawl on the living room floor, sketching pictures of the 3 of them, stick figures with Brave's tail drawn extra big. Richard framed one and hung it by the fridge, a silent promise to keep this fragile peace. At night, Brave slept by Lily's bed, his snores a steady lullaby. For the first time in a long while, Richard felt like he could breathe. But something nagged at the edges. It started with a call at the station one Tuesday morning. "Heads up, Rich," his partner Tom said, tossing a clipboard onto the desk. "Seismic folks say there's a fault line acting up a few miles out. Low risk, but they're keeping an eye on it." Richard skimmed the report, technical jargon about tectonic shifts and pressure points. "Earthquake? Here?" he snorted, leaning back in his chair. "We're not exactly in California." Tom shrugged. "Just saying, keep your radio on." Richard brushed it off. Their town was a speck on the map, too small for big trouble. The days rolled on, uneventful. Lily started stringing together longer sentences, asking Brave things like, "Do you think Mummy likes dogs up there?" Richard caught her once, kneeling by the window, pointing at the stars. Brave sat beside her, his nose pressed to the glass. It was moments like that, soft, unguarded, that made Richard think they'd turned a corner. He even let himself imagine a future, maybe a bigger house, a swing set for Lily, a quiet retirement for Brave. Then Friday hit. Richard was halfway through his patrol route, cruising past the old mill, when the ground shivered, a low rumble, like a truck passing, but it didn't stop. His radio crackled. "All units, we've got a situation. Magnitude 6.2, epicenter 10 miles north." Tom's voice cut through static. Richard's stomach dropped. The steering wheel vibrated under his hands as the road buckled, a jagged crack splitting the asphalt. He slammed the brakes, tires screeching, and leapt out. Around him, the world unraveled. Trees swayed wildly, power lines snapped, and a chorus of car alarms blared. "Lily!" he shouted, though no one could hear. He sprinted toward home, heart hammering, but the street ahead collapsed into a sinkhole, swallowing a parked sedan. Dust choked the air, stinging his eyes. "Rich, get back!" Tom yelled, grabbing his arm as another tremor rocked the ground. "Aftershocks are coming. You'll get yourself killed." Richard fought against him, desperation clawing at his chest. "She's alone, Tom. Lily and Brave. They're all I've got." But the road was a maze of rubble now, impassable. His knees buckled and he sank to the pavement, fists pounding the dirt. "I should have been there," he rasped, voice breaking. "I should have stayed home." The shaking stopped, but the silence was worse. Smoke curled from shattered houses, sirens wailed in the distance, and Richard sat there staring at the wreckage of his world. He pictured Lily's face, her tiny hand in Brave's fur, and prayed harder than he ever had, that they were still alive. Dust stung Lily's eyes as she coughed, her small body wedged in a pocket of darkness beneath the wreckage. The house had caved in around her, beams and drywall pinning her in a cramped hollow. She clutched her knees, the air thick with grit, her breaths shallow and fast. "Brave," she whimpered, voice trembling. A low whine answered, and she felt his warmth beside her. The dog's bulk pressed close, his fur matted with dirt, shielding her from a slab of ceiling that had crashed down inches from her head. Lily reached out, her fingers brushing his flank. "You're hurt," she whispered, feeling a sticky patch where his hind leg had been gashed by a jagged board. Brave licked her hand, his tongue rough but steady, and shifted his weight to nudge her closer to his side. She buried her face in his coat, the familiar smell of him cutting through the panic. "We're going to be okay, right?" she asked, her words muffled. Brave huffed like he was agreeing, and she clung to that sound. Under the rubble, time blurred. The ground still trembled now and then, sending trickles of debris raining down. Lily's stomach growled. She hadn't eaten since breakfast, but fear drowned out hunger. Brave moved, his claws scraping against concrete as he pawed at the mess around them. He dug with purpose, shoving aside chunks of plaster, his injured leg dragging behind. "What are you doing?" Lily murmured, lifting her head. He didn't stop, tunneling toward a faint sliver of light where a wall had buckled. She crawled after him, her hands shaking as she pushed broken glass aside, trusting him even when she couldn't see the way out. They hit a dead end, a slab too heavy to move. Brave growled low, then turned back to her, his eyes glinting in the dimness. He nosed her gently, urging her to stay put, then limped to the edge of their prison and let out a bark. It was sharp, piercing, cutting through the muffled chaos above. He barked again, louder, his chest heaving with the effort. Lily pressed her hands to her ears, the sound rattling her skull, but she understood. "Help us," she yelled, her voice cracking as she joined him, banging on the slab with her fists. Brave kept going, each bark weaker than the last, until his legs buckled and he slumped beside her, panting hard. Outside, the world was a blur of shouting and clanging metal. Richard had joined the rescue crew, his uniform torn, hands raw from clawing through debris. "Sector C's next! Move it!" the team leader barked, directing floodlights over the ruins of his street. Richard swung a pickaxe at a collapsed porch, sweat mixing with dust on his face. "She's here somewhere," he muttered, more to himself than anyone else. "She has to be." His arms ached, his lungs burned, but he didn't stop, not when every second felt like it could steal her away. Then he heard it, a faint, hoarse bark, barely audible over the grind of machinery. Richard froze, head snapping toward the sound. "That's him," he rasped, dropping the axe. "That's Brave." He bolted toward a pile of rubble near where the living room used to be, waving frantically at the crew. "Over here! Listen!" Another bark, weaker now, followed by a thin cry. "Daddy!" Richard's heart lurched. "Lily!" he shouted, diving into the mess with his bare hands. The team rushed over, tools flashing as they attacked the pile, shovels biting into wood, crowbars prying at stone. Minutes stretched into forever, but then a gap opened. Richard peered through, his flashlight catching a glimpse of Brave's matted fur and Lily's tear-streaked face. "Hold on, baby, I'm coming!" he yelled, his voice breaking. The crew worked faster, heaving a final beam aside, and Richard reached in, pulling Lily free. She threw her arms around his neck, sobbing, her grip fierce. "Brave saved me," she choked out, pointing back at the hole. Richard handed her to a medic and dove back in, dragging Brave out with a grunt. The dog's leg was bloody, his eyes half closed, but his tail thumped weakly against the ground. Richard sank to his knees, cradling them both. Lily pressed to his chest, Brave's head in his lap. "You did it, buddy," he whispered, tears cutting tracks through the grime on his face. "You brought her back." Lily clung to Brave's fur, her sobs softening as the dog licked her cheek. Around them, the crew clapped, their cheers a distant hum. For Richard, there was only this: his daughter breathing, his dog alive, and a gratitude so deep it hurt. The moving truck rumbled away, leaving Richard standing on the porch of their new home, a modest one-story with chipped paint and a patchy lawn. It wasn't much, but it was theirs, a fresh start carved out of the chaos. He hefted a box labeled Lily's Stuff and stepped inside, the wooden floor creaking under his boots. "Better than a tent, right?" he called over his shoulder. Lily giggled from the yard, her voice bright as she tossed a stick for Brave. The dog hobbled after it, his bandaged legs slowing him down, but not his spirit. Weeks had passed since the quake, and Brave was on the mend. The vet had stitched him up, prescribing rest and a slew of pills Richard kept forgetting to give on time. "He's a tough old mutt," the doc had said, ruffling Brave's ears. "Give him a month, he'll be chasing squirrels again." Lily had taken it as her mission to nurse him back, setting out water bowls and sneaking him bits of her toast. "You gotta get strong," she'd tell him, patting his head like a little general. Watching her, Richard felt a quiet pride. He hadn't seen her this alive since before everything fell apart. They settled into the new place slowly. The living room got a second-hand couch, the kitchen a table with wobbly legs Richard promised to fix. Lily claimed a corner for her crayons, papering the walls with drawings of Brave as a superhero, cape and all. One evening she tugged Richard's sleeve, holding up a sketch of the three of them under a rainbow. "For the fridge," she said, beaming. He pinned it up with a magnet, stepping back to admire it. "Looks like we're a team, eh?" he said, and she nodded, fierce and sure. Richard made a call he'd been mulling over for days. "Hey, Chief, I'm taking some time off," he said into the phone, leaning against the counter. "Need to be here for them." The line crackled, then his boss chuckled. "About time, Rich. Tell that dog he's got my respect." Hanging up, Richard exhaled, the weight of patrol shifts lifting. He'd go back, eventually. Bills wouldn't pay themselves, but for now he wanted mornings with Lily's chatter and evenings with Brave's snores. Richard thought about Anna sometimes, her smile flickering in Lily's grin. The pain hadn't vanished, but it had softened, woven into something bearable by the life they'd built. He reached over, scratching Brave's ears. "You're stuck with us, old man," he murmured. Lily giggled, and Brave's tail thumped the ground a steady beat. As the light faded, Richard knew they'd found their way, not back, but forward, to a family made whole by love and a dog who'd never given up.